All right, welcome everybody for another episode of my favorite horror movie. It's a big one. We got a really cool guest here today. We got Jay from Bloodbath TV. He also has his own channel where he does these really cool movie reactions. And the film he picked is one of my personal favorites. It's in my top three. And it's a film that's personal for Gabe too, because he loves Wes Craven, and that is Scream. So kick back, relax, talk shit about Gabe in the comments because he deserves it. And let's talk about the 1996 classic, Wes Craven's Scream. All right, Jay, welcome to the show, man. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for the invite. It's always fun to chat about horror movies, especially when you love them so much.
Right. Especially this one, which, I feel like we can all talk about, even though it's been talked about to death, we can add a little bit more to the conversation because we
I
haven't done
hope. We'll see.
it
We'll
yet.
see. I've been drinking. I've had a few drinks. I rewatched this right before, just because why not? And
I
I
did too. I should
probably drank a
been
little
drinking with
too
you.
much beforehand.
What's your drink of choice?
Crown and Pepsi,
Nice Pepsi.
huge fan. And then you got the backup PBRs because they're cheap and it doesn't matter after the first drink.
PBRs are the only ones that I get if I go to like this like retro hipstery bar in Chicago. They won't have anything else, but they'll have
That's
PBR.
so weird. It's just because it's cheap. I'm happy that there's like an influx of love for it because
Right.
it's just like okay, have it everywhere, have it on tap. I love it.
Right.
When I used to drink, it was the Miller High Life, the champagne of beers for me.
Oh hell yeah.
You're fancy, man. Well, guys, let's get this started, and I'm gonna jump right into it. And Jay, like, talk to us about your history with Scream, man. Like, take us to the beginning. Why is this one of your favorites?
Okay. This one's kind of interesting because so I grew up. I loved horror movies for like most of my life since I was like probably six, I think. And it was like Child's Play was my first one, and I started to fall in love with horror movies. But like, there wasn't like a movie that I really clung to other than like maybe, I think, Jason Goes to Hell prior to this. But 1996, I was trying to get with one of my friend's sisters and I was like trying to be like the cool dude. I had like recently picked up smoking as like an 11-year-old or a 10-year-old, and she was like a couple years older. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna come over here. She's got this new horror movie, and I'm a horror buff at the time. I mean, I've seen like what 5 or 6 at that point, and I'm like, hell yeah, we're just gonna like sit on the couch, and I'm gonna just like try and get with her. And that's not exactly what happened. We did have fun, because Scream's an awesome movie. But that was like my initial goal. So I'll always remember the day because I thought I was so cool. But looking back, I was just such a little idiot because she was probably like 3 years older than me. She wasn't ever gonna get with me. But in my mind, I'm like, I'm smoking. Come on, this is cool as hell.
Did you put one of those like, hey?
Yeah, yeah. And I'm sure my buddy was like, dude, what are you doing here? Like, get out of here. I thought we were supposed to, like, go play Star Wars because that's what we were going to do. And then I'm like, no, no, no. We're going to watch Scream with the girls. And ever since, like, I fell in love with it. I got the VHS tape and I wore that thing out just because I just fell in love with all the characters. Obviously, like, keeping up with it, like, throughout the course of time now. I mean, it's how many years later? Like 25, 27 years later?
Right.
Like, that's crazy. And I still love it to this day. Like having just rewatched it, I still have the exact same appreciation that I did way back in the day when I would watch it on repeat. And I don't know. Like, now I like it for different reasons. I think when you're a kid, you're like, oh, cool. Tatum, she's a babe. I love her. Ghostface, really cool. I didn't really know any of the movie references. I didn't understand meta at the time. It was a completely different experience, and I think that's why I just like I continue to love it, and my love grows for it even more now.
No, for sure, I get you. And you said something about '96 and not being able to like try to like other horror movies at the time. So in recent years, right, there's been a push to say that Scream didn't save horror in the 90s. What do you think about that?
That's tough because I don't know that I was the right age to really have a good say in it. Like looking back, maybe like I really liked like the late '90s horror. We had like Cruel Intentions, Disturbing Behavior, The Craft. There was like so many cool horror movies, which I don't think were necessarily completely influenced by Scream. But we do see it trend nowadays because of the use of meta in horror movies to right now. So I don't know how influential it was at the time, aside from kicking off like, oh, I guess that was 2000. Like, Scary Movie had a 5 movie run based on this movie. Like, that's crazy. I think it was. I don't know. It's really tough. I would have had to be a little bit older to really like figure that out.
Fair.
No, no, absolutely. So I think the opening sequence, it's one of the most memorable of any openings ever. What do you think makes it so iconic?
Oh, well, I think right out the gate, you have your final girl. Is so the audience is to believe. Drew Barrymore, like, you know her name. She's a pretty blonde girl, like, wearing a little sweater. Like, she seems so innocent. Like, this is exactly what a final girl is. And so you're like, okay, nothing's going to go wrong. And then they start talking about other horror movies, and you're like, what? Wait a second. I watch Halloween. I've seen that movie. I know Freddy Krueger. And when they're like, oh, who's the killer in Friday the 13th? Me as a kid, of course, I was acting exactly like her. It's like, yeah, I saw that movie 20 times. It's Jason. I would have done the exact same thing. So you immediately start to put yourself in that situation.
Right.
And then just like the mayhem and the voice and everything, just like, I absolutely love this opening sequence. I think the best part, though, like aside from all of this, is like the end where you think like, okay, there's finally her parents are showing up. There's the car. She's gonna make it, and then just nope. She gets stabbed and she's crawling. And even though her parents are just feet in front of her, she doesn't even have the voice to be able to yell to them, and that's just like heartbreaking. And then seeing the parents' reaction to it, you're just like, holy shit, this is ridiculous. So
Yeah.
so iconic.
It is, but I think the parents were more concerned about the smell of the flowers. Like, oh, you can return. I told you to return those flowers.
They wouldn't have like right because they're not to know that anything's happening. It's whatever. It's just a normal day to them, which ends up being the worst day of their life.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's crazy.
Right. And I think that's what like the big themes of like slasher movies is like the decay of middle of America. That you never expect these things to happen until it does happen. And for a while, it goes back to Gabe, what you talked about. A lot of studios felt like Scream revived horror. I feel like in this sense that it did, where we had the Friday the 13th and the Nightmare on Elm Streets to the point where these things weren't seen as bankable, and Scream found a way to make that scary again and fresh again, and audiences just drove to the theater, and everybody at Dimension and the Weinsteins were like, "Oh, we could like make this like 20 times over." And call it different things like urban legend and I Know What You Did Last Summer. I
Absolutely.
think it all goes back to this scene, and Drew Barrymore is like the coach of this all. She's the one that read this script and went, "Oh, I have to be involved in this." And she's the only reason Wes Craven wanted to be like he turned this down like 6 times over. He did not want to make
Oh
this movie.
wow.
He got tired of it. He's like, "I'm not making another slasher movie." But Drew Barrymore is the person that really drew him to this, and she was supposed to be Sydney. But I feel like it goes back to what you said. This movie works better because of her in the opening scene. Because you're used to Drew Barrymore. It's like, oh, E.T., Firestarter. You know who she is, America's
Yeah.
Sweetheart, and kill her in the first 9 minutes in the most brutal way possible. And then, bam, cut to the title. It's one of the most iconic opening scenes of all time.
Absolutely. And like yeah, if Nev Campbell did that, if she played the intro, that would have been terrible. Nobody knew
Right.
her. Like
The impact isn't the same.
I knew her from a weird Canadian show called Catwalk, which I don't think anyone has ever seen before. There was like maybe one season.
No, I
That's
think
awesome.
Party of Five was where I saw
That's
her
what I was about
first.
to say. Yeah, Party of Five.
But
Nice.
also to go back to your little quick note that I saw was that Wes Craven was tired of doing horror and he was going to do something else. And then he met this little kid, and this little kid said that his movies were ass because he wasn't doing horror anymore, that he was gotten weak,
Right.
and that sort of
Toxic.
convinced Wes Craven to go back into horror and be like, yeah, let's go ahead and do
All
Scream as
right.
well.
I
Well,
gotta do some brutal shit here. Come on.
this might have been around the time he did Vampire in Brooklyn, right? And I'm guessing
Oh,
that's probably
yeah.
the movie the kid referred to.
It came out the year before. I just watched that the other day, and it is awful. I
It's
like.
pretty bad.
So
It's
is this
just.
Wes Craven's best horror movie then?
Good
Uh,
question.
I think that's. It's tough. It depends. Like in my opinion, yes. But I know a lot of people will obviously say Nightmare on Elm Street. New Nightmare is up there for me as well. Um, I think that it's a product of its time. I think it was really important, and for me specifically, growing up after it came out, like with everything to come after, it is for me. But if you grew up in the '70s and you watch stuff like Hills Have Eyes or Last House on the Left, like those are going to be more impactful
Right.
because like it mattered. It like certain things that they shown like weren't showed before, and you're just like, what the hell are you doing here? Like this is so creepy. It's really tough. And so like I think that he has a pretty massive catalog. I haven't even seen all of them, to be honest.
He's got a huge catalog, and I think what's so cool about Scream is at the time we had this new Hollywood in the '90s where it was guys like Tarantino and Roger Avery, uh, and Robert Rodriguez, and all these guys that you would expect to direct this movie. All their names are in it, and Wes Craven's the only one that got it. I feel like it's his most polished movie. It's from beginning to end. It feels fresh from the direction, and he knows when to go over the top stylistically and when to pull back and aim on suspense, right? Like I feel like it's the best of both worlds. So I would say it's probably his best. I don't know about movie, but maybe his best like directorial sort of effort.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure.
No, for sure. I think Robert Rodriguez was gonna do it, but Kevin Williamson didn't like. He was gonna change some things to the script because he was gonna play it more like a comedy.
Exactly. Yeah.
But Rodriguez ended up being like the director of the Stab movies going forward.
And he also did The Faculty with Williamson. So like
Right.
kind of works out. But that even The Faculty is very tongue in cheek, more so
That
than
movie
Scream.
rocks.
It
I
does rock.
absolutely love
Listen,
that
I
movie.
love the Faculty. Like I just rewatched it a couple weeks ago, and the Faculty was just it holds up so well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, what's your favorite kill in Scream?
I think that aside from the intro, because I think the intro is obviously iconic, I think most people will agree that Tatum's death is the best.
Oh,
I would assume if it wasn't Kenny, the cameraman, because that was a shock with the camera delay and he just gets the nice slice, that's a good one. But Tatum going out like the cat door, great. Not only because of her entrance into the garage, which everyone is pretty aware of. Like, that's probably why I love this movie way back in the day.
right.
But, like, the way that she calls him Ghostface, which is like the first time ever, and potentially up until like the fourth movie or something, she's the only person to say Ghostface. She throws beer bottles, she fights her ass off, and unfortunately, she gets crushed in the cat door. And I love that. I mean, I pour one out for her if she didn't throw them all at him, but
Right.
it was good.
I felt like I feel like I watch this movie like 2-3 times a year. But the most recent rewatches, I didn't realize how brutal her death is. She gets stuck in there, and I guess
When
maybe
you
watching
see
it,
like the split,
yeah, like oh man, just like crunching and like watching on VHS and other formats and DVD. I feel like you don't even notice it until now. Now, like it's like my eyes are looking for something new because I've seen it so many times.
that's
My
what I
biggest
felt
takeaway.
like.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's only on for like a split second, so you can tell that they shot something and they're like, "All right, what do we need to get this like to
Right.
the rating?" And
Yeah.
I think the same is true for like Steve's death at the beginning. I'm in Canada, so I think that we have a different version where I looked into this and apparently like the cut on his stomach doesn't show anything on a lot of releases, which is crazy to me because I see intestines and stuff sitting there.
Ours is, I know with the MPAA, Wes Craven fought, and I think that was the longest part of the process of making the movie was the editing. They spent like 6 or 7 months editing the movie just because the MPAA was like, going, you have to cut this, you have to cut that. And at that point, they were just like, oh shit, like we made this super intense movie. You have to keep going back and making another cut and another cut.
Well,
I know
cuts.
Steve's death was a big part of that. We see the intestines in our cut.
It's because it's the extended cut. It's like
Is
the
okay.
director's cut.
Oh,
The theatrical cut, they don't show the intestines on
Wow.
both Steve and Casey.
Oh wow.
interesting. Okay.
I didn't know that,
So when you
but I
see
knew.
Casey hanging by the tree and the intestine is like falling out, that's the extended cut.
And I do
Hmm.
know, like, even Canada, you guys have like 14A and things like
Yeah,
that.
there's like a lot more. There's not just PG-13 to R
Right.
or whatever. Like, yeah, we have like little micro steps. So, okay, show us a little bit more. It feels like YouTube to some degree. You know how many cuts I need to make to some of these videos to get them out? It's like going to the MPAA. It's like, oh, no, I can't show these intestines? All right, but I can show these hard nipples? Okay, got it. Let's go.
Which is like probably like the most paused part of Scream, right? It's just that garage entrance. It's like pause.
Maybe, but I was always a huge fan of the red pants and the silver top. When when Stu grabs Tatum and picks her up and slaps her ass, I loved that. I thought that was the coolest scene ever.
So here, my next question is going to be very, very detailed because I
Oh
was
fuck.
in my feels last night. But it plays part to that whole late 90s, early 2000s, how the way the world was at the time. But so Scream was the subject of much debate after some real life murders occurred in which the killer said that they were inspired by Scream. Do you think horror movies encourage violence? Because like 3 years after Scream was released, Columbine happened, right? And the shooters blamed it on Marilyn Manson. So do you think like graphic violence in the arts, desensitizes humanity to like real life consequences of acting out those depictions? It's like Stu towards the end saying they're going to be famous.
I would argue that Scream also answered this with
They do.
uh, it doesn't they don't create psychos. They make psychos more creative,
Right.
right? So growing up, like when you're 6 years old or 7 years old watching horror movies, like I'm 38 now. I have not wanted to kill people. It's not a
So
thing. It's like, yeah, of course, there's going to be some correlation of interest at some point, but it's not going to be the sole reason anybody does anything. It's been the same thing with like video games or violence. They said the same thing about GTA when it came out. It's like this has been like debunked over and over and over again. And well, there might be a handful of serial killers that go on record and say, yeah, I did watch a lot of horror movies. Yes, I did have like I've seen American Guinea Pig like in people's collections be referenced when they killed people. It's like, yeah, I've got a lot of different shit. I also have a bunch of Marvel figures. Did they influence me to kill? No. Just like people are going to look for a certain pattern to push something. So,
yeah,
I don't think necessarily no. Like you can watch I don't know. I would argue that a lot of us on YouTube watch way more horror movies than a lot of normal people do, and I don't think that makes us any more psycho.
Right. I think the Marvel example is a great example too, because in the 50s, there was this doctor who was pushing this idea that comic books turned young boys gay. And, or they made them like, there was the kid that jumped
The
off his
fucking
roof. And
spandex, dude.
right. It was like Batman and Robin are homosexuals, and he had this whole study on it. Or because this one kid jumped off his roof because he thought he could fly, they blamed it on Superman. And the 70s, there was the scare because of Manson. So movies were directly responding to that, like Dirty Harry, or the 80s with Satanic Panic. Scream came out like dead center of when like high school shootings and killings were happening. So they were like put on the under a microscope between 1, 2, and 3. All three of those movies had to make a bunch of crazy changes because of real life events. So I'm
It's
with
just
you though,
gonna
man.
it's gonna be like that forever because there needs to be something that influences it. Like, even though there's like evidence to say, like, no, these
Right.
people were suffering from these mental illnesses and these were the problems, or maybe like past trauma caused certain things. Like, somebody at a news station is like, but we can make a lot of money if we just throw Scream under the bus.
Right,
Come on.
right, right. Or Batman or something
Yeah.
when the theater shootings happen, or yeah, it's
Or
exactly that.
or
Yeah.
Bert and Ernie for homosexuality.
Right. I forgot all about that.
I forgot about that too.
That was another thing that people were in uproar about. But man, no, it's a good thing to when it comes to Scream, it's like something you can't even avoid because like you said, Gabe, it was directly at the center of
It
like all of
was.
these things. Yeah.
I'm about a year older than Jay. I'm 39, so I remember vividly that whole era of like 96 to like 2002, where just like anything that would happen, it's they were blaming it on Marilyn Manson, they were blaming it on Scream, they were blaming it on I Know What You Did Last Summer. It's just like the media just wanted something to blame. I remember Mortal Kombat in like
Oh yeah.
'94 for like Super Nintendo. They had to take away the blood. Like all Mortal Kombat games on Nintendo had no blood. You had to put in the
Right.
cheat
You got
codes.
to put in the blood code. You
Right.
had to put in the blood code.
Yes.
Oh,
No.
man.
So there's something that I wanted, like I said on social media yesterday, I wanted to talk about how great Matthew Lillard is in this because Kevin Williamson has always said that he felt the character was underdeveloped in the script, and then Matthew Lillard has come out and said that when he sees his performance, he thinks he shows too much teeth and too much gums, and he wished that he could change his performance. But I think he's great. And I just want to touch base on, does everybody else think that Matthew Lillard's performance is just phenomenal in this?
Absolutely. He's just he becomes like you see it like him change. Like obviously early on he's acting goofy when he's talking to Randy, talking to everybody when they're like the liver joke. But he's like liver alone. And he's just like kind of wacky, but then when you see him kind of like after he's been stabbed in the kitchen, it's like holy shit. This guy is absolutely mental. And just his performance is amazing. Especially when he's like on the phone and he's just like crying, talking about how his mom and dad are going to be so mad at him, and just like, you hit me with the phone, dick. And there's just like so many times, even when he's talking, I think he's like holding the gun or something, or holding a knife, and he's like, there's spit coming out of his mouth when he's yelling.
Right.
Like,
There's that spittle on the chin.
it's just, it adds to it. It adds to the performance because he doesn't give a shit, because normal people would wipe that off. Like that's just an instinct, but he doesn't have that. He's too busy getting his shit in. He's like, I need to tell her what's going down. This is why we're doing it, and this is what we're up to. And he doesn't give a shit about what's going on. He could be bleeding all over the place. There could be spit on him. I know. Here we're like, oh, I would have wiped that spit off. It's like, yeah, his stomach's also bleeding all over the floor.
You know what adds to? Sorry, Gabe, to cut you off. What adds to it though, too, is that Lillard kind of plays the same character in every movie, and like She's All That and Shaggy and Scooby Doo, to where having him play it that way in this sort of flips it on its head. Because I can imagine audiences at that point would go, okay, well, this guy's clearly not the killer because he's too dim-witted and he's very much the comedic relief. How can he be one of the killers? And then the movie, bam, third act comes in and he's fucking psychotic.
Yeah.
I think that's brilliant for that time. It kind of is. I mean, we know the reveal now, but I can only imagine for audiences at that moment, it was this huge thing because this guy that they spent like 70 or so minutes with thinking was the comedic sort of sidekick is actually a psychopath. And I
I'll
think
be right
that
back.
works. Right. And he's like mocking even his back and forth with Randy. He's sort of like he knows of the rules and he's mocking the rules actively throughout the movie, even at the video store where he goes, there's no way Billy could be the killer. And then like they're having that back and forth. The reveal at the end just makes it all that stuff pays off much better because of it. So.
Yeah. And even watching it back and knowing who the killers are and paying attention to like Billy and Stu's interactions, especially when they're at the fountain, you can kind of like, something's going on. I should have known.
Right.
But they're so good at the way that they
Right.
spin it, where they're like, well, if we lock up Billy, everyone, we expect them to think it's Billy, and we're gonna turn it on its head. We lock him up so it can't be Billy, and you're like, well, what the fuck? There's only ever one killer. And then here's Stu.
Houston, I'm feeling a little woozy here. I love that. I quote that all the time. It's like one of my favorite lines on this movie.
He is just, yeah, he absolutely killed the performance, and I think that everyone who watches Scream can agree with that. I've never seen a negative comment about it, but
Yeah.
it's the internet, so I'm sure they're out there. I don't want to find them. Uh oh,
Oh,
Gabe,
Oh,
there's
it
there's
happened. Oh, you're back.
it's that streamer. I like for some reason it just goes away. Which brings me to the next question. Then, do you think Billy's and Stu plan is like actual like viable?
it seemed pretty legit, to be honest. I mean, they had everything fairly planned out. I think aside from not wiping down the phone and the recorder or like the voice changer when they slip it into the dad's pocket, probably. I mean,
I
they're
would say it went pretty well. I guess they didn't account for, Gale Weathers somehow surviving everything and Sydney being able to kick ass. So,
yeah, that's what's great is like I love that all the women kick the shit out of them over and over again.
yes.
And
Even
so
the
you're
ones that
like,
die. Yeah, they like
yeah,
totally fight back. Yeah.
but I do think that their plan was really good because everyone was already thinking it was Neil. Like the cops thought it was Neil,
Yeah.
and all they needed were the proper things in place at the house. They needed to kill Randy, though. I don't know why they didn't. I mean, I don't even think that was in their plan, but he was still in the house.
Right.
He got shot in the shoulder.
I always wonder if they did plan on killing Randy or
It's
just
like
pinning it on him somehow.
it would have. This would have been one of those things. Like he's the one watching all the scary movies. It was him, obviously.
Right. Which they allude to earlier, which, yeah, I always wondered, every time I watch Scream, I always wonder, I'm like, man, Stu really likes Randy. Would he have killed Randy if, like, push come to shove? Like, would he have done it? I don't know.
But how's Randy part of that friends group though? You know what I'm saying? Like
He's like, I feel like everybody's got that guy in high school. He's just like the funny guy that's really dopey that tries to hit on the girls, doesn't really work, and he's like obsessed with like, for him it's movies and stuff.
Oh shit. I don't have the retention. Like I can't remember everything like Randy does, but I was probably similar to him. But yeah, I don't know if Randy was supposed to like I would have liked to see an alternate timeline, but I don't want to wish that into existence. Stay away from this Blumhouse.
Reboot everything.
you
I
don't
don't know.
want to scream. You don't want to see Scream 20 years later, S2O or S30.
You don't want to see Scream kills and Scream ends?
I say that I wouldn't, but of course I would. I'm gonna go to the theater and watch that if they exist, even if I end up walking out pissed off. I want to see them.
What's so cool about these movies is that even the ones that are like, everybody has their own opinions, but the ones that, for the most part, people agree are the lesser entries are still like miles better than most slasher sequels. And like even 3, which I feel like has its hardcore fans, and then everybody else is like, too goofy. It's still like there's some really highlighted, well-made moments in there, like the Parker Posey character, the Hollywood stuff, even like the Leaf Schreiber opening sequence is really good. But it like that just I don't know. I don't know how you would even reboot Scream down the line because you could just keep going with this until like
They can continue this series.
yeah,
for sure.
Exactly.
There's always going to be somebody else that was tinkering somewhere along the line. I mean,
Right.
you've seen how they drag out the Saw franchise. I mean, you can always just insert some other character that was doing something somewhere.
And Jigsaw's been dead since like the 3rd movie, and there's like 9.
They find a way to make them work in
And
every
they
movie.
announced today that he's going to come back for the 10th one. Tobin Bell's in it.
Oh, I hope they have him come back and he's young and they just give him the backwards hat.
The backwards hat again? Hell yeah. Yo, that's what keeps me young too. I get it.
That's what I love about the Saw movies is like to like signify a flashback or a person's younger. They're always wearing a backwards hat. Like Chris Rock. How do you make Chris Rock look young? Like let's give him a backwards hat and a goatee, which looks bad. It's just like it looks taped on. He looks like one of the Little Rascals, like wearing like an adult costume.
Oh my god, that's like the downside of high definition these days. Like if these were on VHS, you wouldn't have even, or even DVD, you wouldn't have even criticized it.
Because when they made the movies, they like didn't even think years down the line people are gonna be talking about this, right? Yeah.
Right. I guess it's just like fuck. Well, how does Spiral get away with it then?
That's
Like
true.
there's no excuse. You knew this was gonna be in 4K.
Right. Gabe, I want to steal a question from you.
Steal away.
I don't know if I don't know if you skipped it by accident or if you were gonna get to it. Where do you rank Ghostface on your all-time slasher icons?
That's an interesting one.
It's a hard one.
And I kind of answered this the other day by accident. So like I have Myers on my forearm, I have Voorhees on my forearm, and somebody asked me who would be on your third arm if you got another tattoo with a serial killer's name on it. And I'm like, what am I gonna do? Like Mocker and Loomis? And that was my first instinct. So I would have to say that they're way up there. But the only reason why they're not top, like Ghostface isn't top tier, as much as I love the outfit, I think the style of Ghostface is really cool because you got the little, even the details like the little glimmery bits in the cloak. The mask is dope. It's always played by somebody else, so it's hard to just say like, okay, Ghostface is always the best. It's like no, but he is great, or she. Like it can be literally anybody,
It can be anybody.
Is anybody. But there are consistencies which are cool. Like it's almost like a lankier frame, kind of like creeping around. Does get their ass kicked over and over again in all movies, and is just driven by some kind of hatred of some sort.
Right.
And like little things like wiping the blood off the knife. Like there are consistencies throughout the franchise, but it's hard to say like, top tier. I would say like if this was one of those ranking lists, probably A, and like Michael Myers and Jason would be like S. It's tricky for me. Even though Scream is like top movie, I don't know that Ghostface is always 100%. Like yes, iconic. Is he the best?
It's a loaded one because you have to break into, all right, are we talking about Billy and Stu, or are we talking about Billy's
mom?
Right. Like who are we talking? Like Timothy Olyphant, even in 2, I think he's good. He plays it so over the top that he kind of comes off like a
I don't like
Stu
that
or
guy.
Billy. Oh, you didn't like him in that one?
No,
huh?
I watched that on Sunday just for no reason because I haven't seen it in a while, and I don't like him. I don't know if it's the actor. I think he tried too hard to be.
Is very whatever, right? Because it's just like, okay, we kind of need somebody, because that script got passed around so many times, and the test screenings were like, I don't know what the true story is. The filmmakers claim like, oh, it was all on purpose, and then people who saw early cuts said, no, it wasn't. We saw a different ending. It was Jerry O'Connell and the roommate that apparently they were the killers, and it was the boyfriend again. What was the other one? There was another ending I heard. Gabe, have you heard about the multiple endings to Scream?
No, I haven't actually. This is all news to me.
Yeah, I know one of them was leaked online, and this is at the dawn of like early leaks on the internet. So,
that's why I never heard about it. I never got the internet till like 2005.
By the time you dialed up your AOL, the movie had come
logged
out.
on to MIRC.
But I can imagine why it's hard because of that, and then even Scream 3. Like I think the brother characters, it's an interesting motivation with Roman. I'm not sure if the execution is quite right. But then again, Jill is fucking crazy, and that works. And even the new one with Toxic Fandom, I'm just like, yeah, I could see one of these motherfuckers getting on there, talking shit on Reddit, and then going over and killing people because
absolutely
the movie wronged them, right? Yeah. But
so where do you rank Ghostface?
Gabe, I'm gonna pass it to you, man. I gotta sit on it. Give me a second.
So I got Freddy on here. I got little Jason over here.
Hell yeah.
And I'll use your example. If I was gonna get a third one, people are gonna come for me because I'm not a huge Myers fan. I would put Ghostface as like my top 3, top 4. I think I love Stu and Loomis so much that I think that I would just take their iteration of Scream of Ghostface as just like top notch, like up on top.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. I think if it was OG, if we're just talking OG, absolutely.
Yeah, that's fair. I think if we look at it from Ghostface is the moniker, and throughout these movies, and it's gonna happen until like you guys are old, and when I'm old, these stories will keep happening because it's about sensationalized violence. And in this universe, somebody's inspired by another person's actions of dunning the costume. It's like evil keeps spreading and spreading, and everybody in these movies are driven by vengeance and revenge. I would probably say Ghostface is maybe at number five, around there. I would like, yeah, I would say number five. If I'm counting all the movies with the characters, I would say just makes the five spot. Probably.
Okay, that's fair.
I would, just
I think
because
that
of that detail.
I would imagine that a lot of people would feel this way, but just because the name is passed, like it's worn by so many different people.
Right.
It's hard to say like the best killer ever. It's just not a thing.
Right.
Sure.
It's true. It's just for me, I don't know. I think that I take the first version of every movie. Mine is Friday the 13th, right? But like the first appearance of Jason, right? The first appearance of Ghostface, of Freddy, Michael Myers, whatever. And I just take that original movie, and that's what I mostly based off a lot of my taste, because you never know if it's gonna get franchised, or you do something like Halloween that has like 10 different convoluted timelines. Like, which Michael Myers are you taking? The supernatural stuff from 4, 5, 6, the brutality of Rob Zombies, or the new one. But anyways, with Ghostface, I think he's, like you said, he's pretty much revenge focused every iteration of it. There's something behind that mask that makes him the same. It might be a different character behind it, but it's the same motivation for each iteration of Ghostface.
Yeah.
Right, sure.
I really love the clumsiness. I think that's like
Right.
the most important part. Is
He's
it
the
does
most
feel like it
clumsy
could
one.
be anybody. Because it's just like, oh, it's obviously not somebody who's very physically intimidating. Somebody that will get punched and kicked downstairs or whatever, and get back up and just keep trying to stab.
And like you said, it's funny because when he was in the camera van, and she had just gotten out, and he's still trying to stab through that little hole. I'm just like, that's still funny.
Not thinking like that's the revenge. That's where you can see it's just like this guy just wants blood.
Right.
Like he's not thinking to walk out of the van and walk around because you would have got her, you idiot. He needs some rules. I'm telling you, Randy, make some rules for him.
That's true. That's true. Gabe, speaking of rules, I'll let you take this one because I thought this was a fun question.
All right. So obviously we know, or we don't, and I'll repeat them for our viewers. But there are 4 rules of horror movies, right? For the first one, you will not survive if you have sex. If you do, or if you drink or do drugs, if you say I'll be back, and everybody's a suspect. So based off those rules, if you were in Woodsboro, would you survive? And are these rules accurate?
I think if I was in so I wouldn't survive. Absolutely not. I'm just like not physically fit enough or have enough attention to like I wouldn't notice that everybody's dying around me. Like if I was Randy, I'd just be sitting there watching, PJ Souls and stuff. I would definitely be killed. Although Randy survived, so maybe I would. Maybe I'd be cool. Like I'd be good just because I didn't even pay attention. The killer sees me, is like, he's no harm. Although Randy was a virgin, so I would die, I guess.
Sydney wasn't.
That's true. There's hope for me yet. I don't know. I think that I would die just like in general in most situations because I'd be the kind of guy that would see a killer and walk up and start to pal around, not knowing, not putting 2 and 2 together. That's like, oh, this guy's harming everyone and potentially me. I was just trying to do like some shotguns with him. Like I would be fucked. But there are a couple. I'm surprised that like a couple rules that I think Randy should have added. Don't run upstairs, which Sydney does like the whole movie.
Yes.
And don't split up, which is not really a thing in Scream. But those are 2 major ones that I would say need to be added to the list.
They do mention it as a rule in Cabin in the Woods, because Cabin in the Woods kind of revamps the rules in their own way, in passing, and then obviously there's that government program does things to make them abide by the rules, like when Chris Hemsworth said, "We should split up," and what's his name? What's that character's name? I forget the stoner.
I don't know his name
Can't
either.
remember it. But
He's the
like,
best though.
He's the best, and he's like, that's such a like stupid idea. What? But I agree. Those are a couple of rules that just like, yeah, especially at this point in time too, because those are things that Scream did throughout the franchise. Still, running upstairs and splitting up. That's how Dewey always gets fucked up in every one of these movies.
Yeah. Thankfully, it works out for like Sydney because she has those like weird fucking doors that locks him, and he's just swinging his hand. But yeah, it just happens over and over again. That's probably why they did mention it. It's like, oh, we're gonna need some way out of this.
I don't know if you have those commercials up there, but the Geico commercials where it's like the horror movie Geico commercials, where it's a guy in a chainsaw mask and there's a car running, and they're like, oh, why won't we get into this car that's running and leave? And then they're like, wait, let's get behind these axes and chainsaws instead. There's like a serial killer after them.
What? That's
and the
awesome.
serial killer just takes off the mask, just like these people are fucking idiots.
Like he's like takes off the mask. He's like, really? Like, okay.
Nice.
I wanted to run down some cool things about the production, because this movie had such a storied production. Kevin Williamson wrote it in Palm Springs over 3 days. Had an outline for
3 days.
3 days kind of makes you like, for anybody that's a
Holy
writer.
shit!
Like,
I can't do anything in 3 days.
Yeah, it's crazy. I always hear these stories like Sylvester Stallone wrote Rocky in 3 days and he was homeless and he sold his dog.
He did porn.
And he did porn. And like Joss Whedon wrote Cabin in the Woods in a hotel room in 2 days. It's just like, God damn you people. Just like, what is wrong with you? But Kevin Williamson wrote this in 3 days. It was called, oddly enough, Scary Movie. Until the Weinsteins took it over, there was a huge battle over the rights of the script. Initially, studios had zero interest. And then the Weinsteins got involved. And then Paramount wanted it. Warner Brothers wanted it. Eventually, it sold for like $400,000, which is still pretty big for a screenplay, especially a spec script. It really doesn't happen anymore. But yeah, it got passed through like many different directors. Sam Raimi. I don't know if you guys would. I don't know how that would have looked with Sam Raimi. I don't know if he would have been in tune with what the kids were at that time period, which I feel like Wes Craven was very open to letting these younger people sort of take over the material. I feel like Sam has such a kooky, crazy style, it would be too distracting.
Yeah, I think so as well.
Yeah, same thing with Rodriguez, right? Like, Rodriguez does the crazy camera moves and the funny jokes, which he does in From Dusk Till Dawn, and it works in there. I don't know if it works in this. Maybe though, because again, we bring up the Faculty, and even though that is a bit more tongue in cheek, it does have the Scream thing going on.
Oh yeah,
that's
cast. True.
Yeah. So, and I believe the other one more person, Danny Boyle and George Romero. Those are interesting ones too. I don't know.
Who's Danny Boyle?
Danny Boyle did Trainspotting. He did Trainspotting.
Oh, okay. That would be a weird.
It's a weird one. It's really weird. I don't know. Who you guys think? Like, if Craven didn't do it, do you think this would have been the same movie, or do you think it would have been one that maybe we don't remember quite as often?
I think so. I don't know if this is not a hot take or anything. I think the simplicity of the camera work specifically is better in this instance, because it allows the characters to play things out naturally. And that's what I like about this movie is the performances. Every time you see Sydney, she's got like this glazed over eyes, like you can tell that she's been dealing with trauma for a year. When you see Stu, like we've said, he's off the rails. Just everything, even just like the way that the characters deliver everything is what makes Scream scream. If you throw Rodriguez at it, if you throw Danny Boyle, well, I'd have to look at more of his
Danny Boyle has a very similar, very showy style.
That's what I would have imagined. And Romero could have probably done it.
That's an interesting choice at that time period. If he would have been in, again, I feel like you had to be. I mean, I think the second candidate would have been Rodriguez. If he, there's times where he tones down the crazy camera moves and editing, uh, and just lets the story breathe. Then yes,
He would be, yeah, he could do it so long as he wasn't going too crazy. Because even in this, there's like a ton of like weird like Dutch angles where they
Dutch
like
angles.
shift the camera, which typically drives me nuts. But for some reason, Scream gets a pass. And I think that Rodriguez does the same thing when it comes to like dolly ins. He
Yep.
loves zooming in, especially like Faculty. Like you see Robert Patrick in the field, and it's the zoom into him and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Is I don't know. I think Rodriguez could have done it. So he's a good stab director. That's good.
he is. And also, Craven was almost fired. I believe just a few weeks, 1 week into shooting. He was nearly fired. They had to scramble to get the opening scene together for the Weinstein brothers to show them, like, hey, this is what we're doing. The Weinsteins thought the mask was not scary. They There were some
God.
other cast members they didn't want. Jamie Kennedy, they did not want Jamie. They wanted Seth Green, and there was
That's
another
fair.
right.
He would have done a great job too, though.
At that time. I feel like it would have been the smart choice, and that's what they were hoping for. Um, Breckin Myers. Breckin Myers was because of Clueless. That was another one where they were hoping he would have done it. And for Gail Weathers, they were looking at Brooke Shields and Janine Garofalo, which Janine Garofalo
Janine
would have been an
Garofalo would have
interesting
been.
choice.
Oh, she would have been
Cool.
great.
Would have been a great choice. But other than that, yeah, everybody else was essentially in this movie casted already. They wanted somebody like Nev for Sydney. That's when they did the switch up because Drew couldn't do it. They're like, well, this works better because we could have her publicity and not tell anybody she's the opening kill, and then bring in a fresh face for people to fall in love with. And even Henry Winkler did not get
Yes.
credited in the movie because they did
Oh,
not
really?
want. Yeah, they didn't want him to overshine the young cast. So it was a surprise to people when they came to the movie and like, oh, it's fucking Henry Winkler, it's the
The
Fonz.
Fonz,
Um,
whose jacket was in the closet in the principal's office.
Yeah.
yes, yes, one of the great character actors ever, I think.
They had me though. He was a good red herring because when
was.
he's like talking to the kids with the scissors, and you're like, the sound design was so good too. I'd just like to
Right.
mention that. Like, I love the sound design just because the knives and the scissors, they all sound super sharp at all moments. And when he's like talking to the kids and he has the mask, you're like, wait, is it him? I didn't know. I mean, obviously it's not, but like,
That would have been cool. The teacher killing. the
it could have
students.
worked.
It's fucking Henry Winkler. It sounds funny within itself. And then we get the great Wes Craven cameo in that scene
Yes,
too, as
Fred.
Fred the janitor. Yeah.
I love
There-
that.
another-
You know what's
another-
weird about that though? Can I just say?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
It's like they live in a world where where Nightmare on Elm Street exists. They mention it in the movie. They mention Freddy Krueger early on. So like Fred is wearing that sweater on purpose. Right? Like
He's
there's
like
no
the
way that
biggest fan
janitor
of Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, there's no way he's oblivious to it because he's probably seen the movie. His name is Fred and he happens to wear that sweater. Bullshit. He knows about it.
Because all the
Sure.
sequels sucks. Remember?
Another thing about this, which I thought was crazy, they wanted to shoot this in California, or initially California. Craven was like, it needs to be in California. It needs to be the all-American town. The Weinsteins did not want that. They wanted Vancouver. They didn't get Vancouver. I forgot what happened. They ended up shooting in Santa Rosa. And even at the end, I don't know if you guys noticed this, they were supposed to shoot at the Santa Rosa High School. The high school didn't want them to shoot it there because of the violent material of the movie. So Wes Craven gives them a little note at the end of the credits saying, and a special not thank you to the Santa Rosa High School. It's like a little petty little message he wrote in there for them. So.
Yeah.
Imagine being that petty. Come on, dude.
But one of the reasons why, and I read into this a little bit, was because they didn't want to be associated with this movie, but yet Wes Craven said that one of the actual students there was pregnant and got into like a fist fight with like her baby daddy while in high school. He's like, yo, they want to be associated with us in a horror movie, but yet their students are pregnant and getting into fist fights.
Jesus Christ. Wes Craven is a petty man.
Wild.
But yeah, we talked about it before. He wrestled with the MPA over the R rating. This movie struggled with that for 6 months. They went back and forth on it. And another thing I just found out yesterday, the cinematographer, who's even credited full for his full work on the film, was fired with a week left into production, and they brought
Oh
on
my
somebody
God.
else to finish the movie. And the reason why is the Weinsteins were very angry about this part, which the Weinsteins kind of suck anyway. It's really every time I have to mention them, I was like, oh, they were mad because they wanted to fire the entire camera crew because during the final sequence, which took 21 days to film that third act sequence,
Whew.
every shot was out of focus. They don't know how it happened, but over 7 days worth of work was completely lost. That's a lot of
No
money.
fucking way. Are you serious?
Yeah, that's a lot to go 7 days and not realize, like, which is weird because you realize, I'm like, don't they check dailies
They
like
check
every day
dailies.
on a film set? Like directors want to go and look. Who knows? It's 1996 to early 96, so who
Yeah,
knows
I
what
guess
they
it.
were dealing with. I mean, now directors go right to the monitor and look at it as soon as it's shot because everything's digital. You go right to it, or even they're standing by the monitor and they see it happening.
Yeah.
But 7 days of footage was completely lost. They threatened to fire the crew, and the cameraman said, well, the cinematographer said, if you're firing my cameraman, my crew, everybody, you fire me too. So they did. And they had somebody else
No,
come and
fire
finish
the
it.
focus puller. Like,
Right.
fire that guy.
Such a strange thing. I didn't. These movies are riddled with production issues and test screenings and trying to hide things. And even now, which I didn't know, like we talked about, the Weinsteins were totally for the movie and the script, but they like hated everybody that worked on it, wanting to fire Craven and the cinematographer. It's just crazy to think about how long this franchise has withstood all these things, like the Columbine stuff, and
Yeah.
even Part Three having to change the script multiple times, and Craven hating Part Three because of that. Even Part Four had to go through so many changes because things were leaked online again. Um, and Five recently, I saw stuff pop up online, and I know they did false endings, and who knows? That's one thing I hope with these movies one day, that we get deleted scenes of just like people you don't expect to be the killer in these
Yeah.
alternative moments.
Kind of
Maybe
like
the
what they did with Clue.
Yes,
Have the
exactly.
multiple cuts. Like, yeah, shoot a couple. So if one leaks, doesn't matter. When you go to see the movie, it's a different one.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Because, like, you can't avoid it. Things leak. It just happens. So there's got to be a way to do something with, like, a B crew and shoot a different ending. And let that one leak. Sure, fuck it. Let that one leak.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I know they're doing that now with the new movies, which I think is smart. That's something that Craven, I know, tried to implement into an onward, but we see how that went. That's what's so interesting about this film, and it's a touchstone in this time period where the internet's on the rise, and movie fandom is at, and it's rising to like, we're at the crazy part of it now with toxic fandom, but like it really does start in the 90s, and the sensationalized violence and all these reports of, does it inspire real life events and this and that. So it's interesting to think about this movie being at the center of all of that. And even now, 20 years later, these movies are still at the center of all of these things.
Yeah.
Wild. It's completely wild.
I love that, though. I do love that. I mean, people keep talking about it, whether it's negative or positive. The
Yeah.
more people talk about it, the more people debate about it online, the more likely that they will keep making them.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, hate clicks get just as many clicks, if not more, than if you love something. So
Sure.
it makes sense.
Gabe, I want to pass it to you, man. Any other questions you got for us, or any little bits of trivia that we haven't covered?
No, just only thing I gotta ask is what and it's another ranking thing, but how do you think about Sydney and Gail as your final girls? Like, how do you rank those? I mean, better than Lori, better than Nancy. I mean,
Yeah, I think that I love Sydney as like a final girl because what separates her from a lot of other final girls is the fact that she already has dealt with this kind of stuff happening with her mom, right? Like this is a full year later after everything with her mother. She's been in the spotlight. She's got Gail writing about her. She has seemingly put her. She's uh, basically fingered the wrong guy and said like, no, it's what's his name, Cotton Weary,
Right.
and in her mind, even after she knows that the killer is still on the loose, she's like, nope, I put her away the guy because that's a way for her to cope with what's going on. Like, she is dealing. She's like she has a whole other battle that she's already dealing with on top of all the physical stuff. So I think that projects her like as like a top final girl because, and that's not to discredit the other women because they're awesome. I love Lori. Nancy, I'm not a huge Nightmare on Elm Street fan in general, so it is what it is. But
I
like
think
Amy,
Gabe's heart just broken too.
I think the same could be said with like Adrienne King in what's it called in Friday the 13th, but like Amy Steele in
Okay.
what, two?
Part 2. Yeah.
Yeah, she's the best. She's like one of my top, but Sydney is way up there. I think she's like Lori tier. I think that they are kind of on equal playing field above Nancy and even Amy Steele. I forget her character name.
Ginny. And
Ginny,
I feel like
yes.
Ginny and Sydney and Gail, they're like, they know what's happening, so they're more prepared and they make like all the smart decisions.
Moves. Yeah.
Like, I feel like what's fucked up about that first Halloween, Lori does not even know she's in a horror movie until the last 10 minutes of the movie, and it's like fight or flight at that point for her.
Yeah.
But what's cool about Sydney and Gail is they kind of get to restructure the final girl formula by being one step ahead in the fight. You know, like they know the rules, they know what's going on, and even if the villain has the upper hand, they're able to come up on top in some kind of way in the series. Which is that's always been the focal point. The focal point of these movies are the characters, and us falling in love. I feel like that's the big thing with Scream is if you don't like the characters, you probably won't like the movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I do want to say that Gail as like her kind of like sidekick, the after all they've been through, because like she hates Gail early on. The fact that they like start to work together, basically because they have to, but they also just eventually just they respect each other at some point. It's interesting. I love their dynamic. So Gail, she's up there. She's not top tier like Sydney, but she's good.
What's so cool about Gail too is, I mean, Courtney Cox is so she's so charming in the role, and she's so funny, and then she's like, obviously at this point in 1 and 2, she's like a smoke show. But they flipped the script because going into this movie, you can assume that Gail's gonna bite the dust. She's a dick this entire runtime. She's going to die, and she might have some of the most badass moments in the movie. She gets the most heroic moments in the movie, especially the first one, but in the second one as well. I don't know. It's just there's so many great, compelling characters. I know they were gonna kill Dewey initially. They did kill Dewey initially, and then test audiences begged for them to let him live, and they went back and they filmed the insert shot of him on the stretcher. It's just so cool.
Oh, that wasn't intended?
That was not intended. That was filmed later on down the line. Yeah.
Like, we love this guy. Come on, bring him back.
And even then, another little tidbit was that was supposed to be somebody that was completely hunky and just super hot, like, I don't know, like a Brad Pitt or somebody of that time period that would have been about 25, 26.
It wouldn't have worked the same. They're back and forth, like Gail and him, especially when she's like talking about like how his upper body is and saying like how he has like a baby face or whatever. Like, I love that dynamic because you're like, there's no way this guy's just a little dweeb. He's not getting the girl.
Right. It's very dopey, but it's romantic. And that's the first two movies focus in on that a lot. That's what makes it work. I mean, the character work in all of these movies are the best parts of why we give a shit about them.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Man, Gabe, if you got nothing else, I got nothing either, man. We covered everything.
We did.
Through it all. Under an hour, too.
Hopefully we got to our target demographic, the 17 to 24-year-olds, you know?
Is that our target demographic?
I was 24 for a whole year.
All right. Jay, anything else coming up on your channel that you want to talk about? Bloodbath or your reaction channel?
Well, I do have Vampire in Brooklyn, a Wes Craven bomb that came out like a year before Scream. So I just watched that for the first time the other day. Not Eddie Murphy's best work, not Wes Craven's best work by far. So go check out J Bond Reacts. I watch a lot of movies, mostly like action and comedies from the 80s and 90s, stuff that I just neglected because I was too busy watching horror movies or rewatching Scream over and over again. Um, and on Bloodbath TV, I've got like all these softcore porn movies coming out. It's weird. It's like Frankenstein in a women's prison, The Mummy's Kiss, and just like a bunch of stuff that you don't care about, but I need to talk about. I just, it's go check out Bloodbath TV. There's weird stuff there. And actually, a movie that we watched recently because of you guys was Cool as Ice. Oh my God, that movie is awesome. I watched you guys talk about that, and like the next day we went and filmed an episode. So that's coming soon.
It's such a gloriously terrible movie. I'm happy you guys watched that because it's so hard to talk about that movie to people because like
I had fun with it.
It's so wacky and weird when he sneaks in her house and puts like ice on her mouth. Like, what the hell? Get out of here!
He does a bunch of. The guy is a troll throughout the entire movie. Just every line that he says.
Drop the zero and get with the hero.
They're playing like the wacky music when he's rolling up. I'm like, what movie is this?
Honestly, that movie is awesome. I don't remember how high the rating is on it, but we had a blast watching it. And yeah, so
I think it's like a 6% or something like that.
Oh, that's just because no one watched it, and like one guy was like, "Fuck this movie."
Right. The one guy at Universal that lost his job over the movie. He's like, "Fuck this movie."
Shouldn't have done that extra long desert scene where they're just standing there with their bikes.
Oh man. Yeah, it's for anybody that hasn't seen that movie. Check it out. Cool as Ice. One of Gabe's favorite movies.
It's on Tubi for free, I think.
Gee, I paid for it. I should have waited.
I'm so sorry.
Jay, I want to thank you for coming on, man. It was such a pleasure. I thought this was such a great episode and a cool conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Everybody at home, make sure you check out Jay's reaction channel, Bloodbath TV. Everything will be down in the information below. Gabe, I'll let you go ahead and close this out today. I'll give you the honor.
What?
Yes.
I don't even know what to say. I've never closed this out. You close this out.
No, I want you to do it. I need you to do it.
All right. Well, then for Jay and Tony and myself, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe, like, and share. And check out Jay's channel. And you guys have a good night.
See you next time, guys.